Hey guys, so it is my favorite time of year and it is the end of the year video time of year, and I've been so busy this December with my kids being home and everything that I have not gotten a chance to film any of my end of the year videos, and it's been very sad because I've been wanting to film them so bad. And today I'm going to start off with my best books or favorite books of 2023, which I love talking about my favorite books of the entire year. It's literally one of my favorite videos to do, and I had a really good reading year this year, and I was filling out my wrap-up pages in my journal, which I'm going to do a whole video on, like my, I don't know, my bookish awards where I do like best couple, best side character, and all that kind of thing. But in those wrap-up pages, I rated my entire reading year an 8.5, which is a really high rating because I had a couple. Was it last? No, it was the year before last year, I think, or maybe it was last year. My reading year just was not the best. I didn't read a ton of amazing books. I think last year is the year that it was because I read one gold star book and that was it. And I just didn't have a lot of books that I just fell in love with. But this year I had 4 gold star reads, which was amazing. And it was just a really like overall good reading year for me. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. Now I'm not going to put these in any particular order. I am going to put the last 3 though in a particular order. So like the last 3 that I talk about are like my top books of the year, and I'm going to save my #1 favorite book of the year for the very last, because I had to kind of like, I filled out a bracket and everything in my journal, and there was one book that just I had to pick as my favorite book of the year, and I'd be curious if you guys can guess it. Like if you guys think you know what book it's going to be, because you guys know I liked a few books, but if you know, put it in the comments if you think you know. So, of course you guys, my freaking reading challenge won't load on my phone. Like, what are the chances of that happening right now? That Goodreads isn't working on my phone. The first book I'm going to talk about was a book that I actually recently finished, and I was not expecting this to end up in my favorite books of the year, but this actually ended up being my favorite book in December. And this is one of those books where I don't feel like it's necessarily going to be everyone's favorite. This is very much a taste thing. And I mentioned in the review that this book scratched an itch in my brain. That's literally the majority of why I liked this, is it's so specific to what I like, and not only is it specific to what I like, it had an excessive amount of that specific thing, and so it made it very satisfying. And that was Make Me by Tessa Bailey, and this is one of her older books. So the thing about this one is it's not necessarily like this epic read that's gonna like change your life. Like, I've read romance novels that I like way more than this one specifically, but the only reason it is in my favorites is because it's so specific to me, and it's just satisfying, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And the thing about this book is it has a really heroic main love interest. Like, the guy in this, like, his main character trait is like being a protector and being a hero, and he's like on the verge of like possessive, like toxically possessive, which is totally not everyone's taste, but I love it. If I have like a heroic love interest that just wants to keep their like the girl, the main character, safe all the time, and they're so worried about him all the time, and they're like, they're damsel in distress, love it. And this guy's like main personality trait was that. And I know I've said in the past, like, Fourth Wing actually had a character like that, but I hated him for some reason. He was so annoying in Fourth Wing. But it was weird because he had that trait, but it was so like flat that I didn't actually like it. But for some reason, the main character in this one, like if you like that kind of thing, where it's like very like much the protector type, the heroic type, you're really gonna like this. And it was just really satisfying. I actually gave it 4.5 stars instead of 5 because I kind of feel like there was some miscommunication in this. Like, the guy was not the best communicator, and you guys know how much I hate like bad communication, but the thing about this is it didn't bother me as much as it normally does, and I think it's because I was getting so much of like other things that I like in romances that it just worked for me. And it's just like my guilty pleasure. Like, this is one of those guilty pleasure romances where you're like, this is not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. So another book that I really loved this year that ended up being one of those books that you just really want to binge, which I think really says a lot about a book when you can just sit down and you just want to binge it and keep reading it and you just like can't get enough of it. And that is Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. And this is one of those books that's kind of short, but there's something about it that just keeps you so invested. Like, I read this book in 2 days, which is extremely rare for me. I'm not one of those people that like reads books in 2 days very often. I'm just very, very busy. But this is one of those books that just kept me reading. And I was so curious about what was going to happen to this character. It was fast-paced, and it was just one of those really good fast-paced YA novels. And I just really, really liked this. And honestly, this book probably made me more uncomfortable than any other book that I read this year. And I wouldn't even say this is a horror. It's more of like a survival thriller. But there were some things in this book that really made me cringe. There's definitely a lot of body horror in this, but this book was really, really good. If you're looking for something fast and just easy to read and something that's just going to be really, really fun and satisfying and to the point, this is going to be your read. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is a book I don't have the physical copy of because I actually read this on audio, but this was an audiobook novella. And when I read this book, I was really surprised at how much I liked it. Like, I wasn't really expecting too much. It was just kind of like, oh, I want to read this book because it's going to take me a day and I can just listen to it for the day and then be done with it. You know, it was one of those types of listens. And it was Dear Saraphina by Avery Bishop. And this book surprised me. And the reason it surprised me is because it had a twist that I just wasn't expecting. Like, I really didn't know what I was going into with this book, and it starts off one way but ends just a completely different way that you're just not really expecting. And I love that it was short. I love that it was to the point. And this is one of those books where I feel like an author could have a really good idea, or could have this idea and be like, wow, this is such a good idea, and they want to write like a 350-page thriller using this idea, but this author knew, like, this doesn't have to be a 350-page book. Like, this can be a novella, and it can still hit really hard and be really, really good, and she just knew that that's all it had to be, and it really, really was amazing. So if you were looking for something fast, something that you can maybe listen to while you're doing a project or something, this is a really good one because I think it was only like 3 to 4 hours, and it was like top-notch thriller. It was really good. So highly, highly recommend this one. It's about a girl who is really obsessed with this actress, and she's kind of like a major, like, obsessed fan or like a stan, and she's constantly writing this actress letters, and she's like kind of using this actress as like a journal, right? Like, she's writing all of her life and life story to this girl and like everything that's going on in her life, and she just keeps writing her and writing her, and it kind of like takes a turn later on in the story, which I'm not going to kind of go into because, you know, I want it to be a surprise, but it's just really, really interesting. If you like fan culture and things like that, then I think you'll really like this. You'll find it interesting, but it was a good one, and one that I was not expecting to like as much as I did. Okay, so the next book is one that I absolutely adored, was not expecting to read this year, was not expecting to really like, well, it's not that I wasn't expecting to love this book, I just wasn't really, I didn't know what to expect with this book is what I'll say, and it is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So Travis is in the middle of reading this right now, and this book was such a surprise for me. Like, I thought I would like it, but I had never read an Andy Weir before, and so I was kind of like, you know, what's his writing style like? And I just kind of picked it up to read the first couple of pages to kind of see what it was going to be like, and I literally did not stop reading for the rest of the night, and I made it to like page 50 when I was just expecting to read like the first page, and it was so engrossing and so engaging that like I just could not stop reading it. And this is a pretty decently long book, and I read this so fast, and the science was really tangible. It took turns that I wasn't expecting, and it introduced me to a new trope that I think I really, really like, and I would like to explore other tropes that are similar, which I don't really want to explain, but basically the story is about like the end of the world, basically, and the main guy is sent to space to try to figure out how to stop the end of the world from happening. Like, in short. I mean, that's like a very vague synopsis. And so what he does is he goes out and he tries to figure out how to save the world. And that sounds really lame. Like, I don't like using that as a synopsis because it sounds lame, but it's so much more interesting than that. And I don't want to give you like a main plot twist because I just don't want to like, I don't want to tell it to you, but it's really, really good. And it's just like a really fun, like great characters, and it's great like relationships and friendships and like all of that kind of thing, which I was not expecting, and it was just so good. And the thing about it is, if you like science, then this is great because like the science is really, really tangible, and it's really fun because you get to kind of dive into the fun, interesting things with science, but it's very easy to understand. So like, you'll like it because it's sciencey but easy to understand science, if that makes sense. And it was just so, so, so good. I highly recommend this. Like, if you've thought about reading it but you're like, ooh, intimidated by it, don't be intimidated by it. It's literally fantastic. fantastic. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Caps is reading it right now. My cousin Chelsea's gonna read it when he is done with it. And I just keep recommending this to everybody. Like, it's one of those books that I just keep recommending. And I think that this actually got my award for most recommended. So this is so good. So Goodreads isn't working on my phone or my computer. So I have to use my journal to figure out what my favorite books were of the year. So luckily I have my journal because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do this. So the next book I want to talk about is The Simple Wild, and this is by K.A. Tucker. So The Simple Wild was an interesting book for me because I didn't love the couple in this. Like, I liked them and I really enjoyed like seeing their relationship kind of build and things like that, and I really want to read the rest of the series actually because I think the rest of the series is actually going to be interesting and it's going to kind of like explore this couple a little bit more because this couple definitely felt very realistic. Like, it wasn't so flowery that like you're like there's no couple that's like this perfect and in love, you know what I mean? Like, this couple felt very realistic, and there was definitely aspects of this couple where I'm like, they're gonna have things to work on, you know, throughout the years. Like, they're not gonna be perfect forever. And so that's kind of something that was a little interesting for me with this one, because usually I will love a romance if I just feel like the couple is absolutely perfect together and they're just so in love and blah blah blah, but this one was just a bit more realistic is the best word I can find. But the thing about this book is I loved the setting. So this took place in Alaska, and she had to go to Alaska to kind of build a relationship with her dying father, and in the process she meets this bush pilot. And there was just something about this story that was so vivid in my mind. Like, it was so fun to read, and I was just so invested in this world and the characters in the setting, and everything in my head was so vivid. And I don't know if it was because of it taking place in Alaska, I'm not really sure, but there was something about this book that just drew me in so much, and it's gonna be one of those books that I'm gonna have a hard time forgetting because it is so vivid in my mind. And I highly recommend this if you really like romance that are like a romance that's more realistic and just a little bit more like in the real world, sort of. And this one was just really fun, and I think that the rest of the series is going to be really good, and I do want to read the rest of the series this year, or at least maybe the next book, and kind of see where the next book takes us, and then if I really like it, then I'll read the next book. But I think that this book was great. Highly recommend it if you want a realistic romance. It was really good. So the next book was an audiobook that I listened to, and it was In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park, and this is a story about her escape from North Korea, and I had this on my Audible account for years. I think the prompt that I picked this book with was a book that you've had on your TBR forever but you've never gotten to it, like just a really old TBR book. And this book literally had been sitting in my Audible forever, and I finally decided to read it because I'd heard great things about it. But I actually wasn't sure if I was gonna love it or not. Like, it was one of those things where I didn't really know what to expect with this one. And let me tell you, when I got done reading this book, I was down a flippin' rabbit hole. Like, I was talking to everyone about this book. I was talking to Travis about this book, and I was like, you have to read this, it's so good. And I was watching all of her interviews, and I was just going down this rabbit hole, and I was just amazed at this girl's story. I feel like this book is very like aspirational and inspirational. Like, you look at this woman and you're like, you are so, like, such a strong person, and I want to be more like you. And like, it's just a really good story. Like, if you want something that's going to inspire you and just make you want to be better, then read this book, because that's kind of how I felt after I got done reading it. Like, I was so invested in this story. And the thing about this book is, I can say, it's the beginning is a little slow. Like, it definitely goes into like her grandparents' life and her other grandparents' life and her parents' life and kind of where she came from. I always find that part of memoirs a little bit on the boring side. Like, I don't care about your grandparents. Like, I want to know about you. And so I did feel like she went into that kind of stuff a little bit too much at the beginning, but after that, like, the story was just so fascinating. Like, I can't explain it. Just read it. Like, if you like memoirs and you kind of like to hear stories like this of just really strong people that like get through really huge hardships, then I think that you're really gonna like this one. So I highly recommend this. I gave this 5 stars. It was amazing. The next book that I absolutely adored this year was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So this book was actually kind of a surprise. I found this book on, or at Goodwill, I think, and I just picked it up because I was like, I like to have thrillers on my shelf for when I'm in the thriller mood. Like, I like to have them available, so I decided to randomly pick this one up, and I had no idea if it was good or if it was bad. Like, I didn't really hear that much about it, and I started reading it, and you guys, this book blew me away. There's something about this book, and I think if you are a parent or a mother, then you're really gonna like this and it's gonna hit a little bit different. One thing I can say is this book is very dark, so you know, I've heard people say that after they got done reading this, they just kind of felt like heavy, and it was dark, and it was just sad, and it is. It's not like this happy-go-lucky thriller by any means. It definitely has hard, dark topics to it. It has children in it, and it just kind of makes you feel sad, but at the same time, there was just something about this that I wasn't expecting. I think that you could probably predict this, and I think people probably did. I didn't for some reason. I didn't start catching on until like the very, very end, so maybe that's why I ended up liking it so much, but there was just something about this book that was really, really impactful to me, and the ending just really did something to me that really affected me and just made me think a lot, and I thought the characters were really interesting as well, and I just really liked this book. I highly, highly recommend this, especially like if you like darker thrillers, then I think that you're really gonna like this. And there's something about Lisa Jewell's writing, like she's really good at keeping you invested and keeping you captivated. I don't know what it is about her writing, but she's so just captivating. Like you just want to keep reading and reading and reading. So this one was definitely a huge, huge contender for one of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely loved it. So the next book on my list is a book that I read earlier this year, I think in like March, because I read this when I was in Hawaii, and it's You Were There Too by Colleen Oakley. So this book I was actually not knowing what to expect. I hadn't heard anything about this book, never heard anyone talk about it, and it's actually an older book. So I was surprised that I hadn't heard anything about it, but I thought the synopsis sounded really good, and it's about a girl who has had this same man in her dreams ever since she was younger, and she's like, who is this man? Like, why is he always in my dreams? I don't understand. Then one day she's like out, she's married, she has a husband and everything, and she's out and she sees this man that's been in her dreams since she was little. And so she actually ends up getting to know him, and she finds out that she's been in his dreams too. And they don't know why. Like, they can't figure out why they're in each other's dreams. And then the story kind of plays out, and you can kind of learn, like, you know, what's going on and everything. And it's very interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting the story to actually go the direction that it went. And I can tell you that I'm not going to say this is written like Colleen Hoover. So if you're not a Colleen Hoover fan, like, don't think that this is a Colleen Hoover book or anything. But it's a story that I could see Colleen Hoover coming up with, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't consider this to be like a romance or anything. It's like a life man's, like just a general fiction of like someone's life, and like how life can be kind of messy, life can be very imperfect, and how you kind of get through these weird, messy, imperfect times in your life. Which I really like stories like that sometimes, because sometimes I feel like romances, they're great and everything, but they're just so like, you know, fantastical and perfect and everything. And these kind of books are more like set in reality, right? Like, things aren't always perfect in lives, and marriages aren't always perfect. One person does something crappy or another person does something crappy, and you kind of have to figure out how to get through it. And it was kind of like that type of book with a little bit of like a magical realism element to it that I was not expecting. It was just a really fun, unique story that I think took a lot of creativity to come up with and to just kind of flesh out, and it was just a really surprising read that I really, really enjoyed. And it was a great vacation read. Like, if you're looking for something to read on vacation, I really liked to read this while I was in Hawaii. It wasn't too like dark, and it wasn't too fluffy. It was just a really good, like, just general fiction with a little bit of like a magical realism element to it. So I thought it was great. I gave it 5 stars. So another favorite for me this year was Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. This author is a new favorite author of mine. I absolutely love her romance writing style. She definitely has this way of making the romance the main thing, but there is like always a really interesting side plot going on, but not like Emily Henry. Like, I feel like Emily Henry, it's like 50-50 romance and then side plot, where they're kind of fighting against each other, and I feel like that was kind of my issue with Book Lovers. But with hers, like, the romance is still like the main thing, and then the side plot is kind of just on the side, but it's still a really, 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 really interesting side plot, if that makes sense. And that's really what I liked about Abby Jimenez's work this year. I think I read 3 books by her this year, and I loved all of them. They were all really good. And this one was about a girl who actually has like a terminal illness, and the likelihood of her dying young is very high. She doesn't know if she's going to die young, but it's a high chance. And what ends up happening is her kind of druggy sister drops her baby off at her house, and she has to take care of this baby by herself. And she's not expecting that she has to do this, but all of a sudden it's just dropped in her world, and she's like, well, crap. And so what she ends up doing is she meets her neighbor, who's this guy, and he can tell that she needs a little bit of help, and so they kind of end up forming this bond. And there's so much actually in this story. There's a lot of little like interesting side plots going on, but it's just a great like friends to lovers romance. And you guys know I love friends to lovers. Like, I'm a friends to lovers girl when it comes to romance. I love it. It's just so endearing to me and sweet. And this is a great friends to lovers that you're gonna love if you like that trope. And this is definitely like super, super high on my favorite romances of all time because it was just overall such a sweet, sweet, sweet read. So the next book is The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and this was a thriller, and this one was really, really good because Taylor Adams is probably the most suspenseful thriller writer that I have read. Like, you know how a lot of thrillers are marketed as thrillers, but you're kind of like, this isn't thrilling. Like, this is not a thrilling thriller, but it's like you don't really know what other genre to put it under, so you just say it's a thriller. I feel like Taylor Adams is that one thriller author that genuinely writes thrilling and suspenseful novels that like keep you on the edge of your seat. And every book that I've read like from him, it's just so, it's like this constant, like, you're just constantly on the edge of your seat. And this book is about a girl who gave an author a 1-star rating, and then the author gets really pissed and he ends up kind of like going after her. Now the thing about Taylor Adams is he's really good at writing like weird plot twists where like one thing will happen that you're not expecting, and then another thing will happen, and then another thing will happen, and then another thing will happen. And it's really interesting, especially too when you read his books via Audible, is you can't see how much of the book you have left. You're just kind of listening. And the entire time I was listening to this book, I was like, okay, so we're gonna be done soon, because like he can't throw something else at us, and then he throws something else at you, and then I'm like, okay, that was the last thing, but then no, he throws something else at you. And I know a lot of people don't love that because they're like, oh, that's unrealistic. But I like it because you're just like, whoa, like this is going just in places that I was not like expecting, and it just keeps like getting twistier and crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier, and that's what I love about his writing, and it's so suspenseful. Highly recommend this. If you like suspenseful thrillers that just keep you on the edge of your seat, like this is going to do that for you. Okay, so the next book is Dirty Liar by Marissa Finch. So this was another little novella on Audible, and this is another one that I was not expecting to like as much as I did, and I read this in a day. Or no, I think I read this in 2 days. And this one was so interesting because this had a twist in it that I was like, whoa, like I did not see that coming at all. And this was one of those books where it was so creatively done. Like, I've never seen somebody do a twist like this or in this way, because I feel like this could be done. Like this could be just like a type of twist that you do, but like I've never seen it done before. And I was like, whoa, it was the first time I'd seen it done, and I'm like, this is actually a really interesting way of like writing a story. And I really, really liked it for that reason, because I was like, that just completely changed everything, and I want to like go back and like reread the book, like knowing that thing at the end, you know what I mean? So I highly recommend this if you want something quick and you want something short and you want something that you can read in like 2 days on Audible. This is definitely the one. It is so random. I just picked it up on a whim because I knew it was short, and I think it was free too. And it was just one of those really, really surprising reads that I highly recommend if you like a really, really interesting twist that you're just not expecting. So I highly recommend this. It's basically about a girl who goes on a walk with her dog, and she falls into this hole, and she gets stuck in this hole, and she's trying to figure out if this hole is like she was captured by somebody, like they actually made the hole to capture somebody, if they were trying to capture her specifically, or if it's just an accident. She's trying to figure out how to get out, and it's just a really, really interesting book. Highly recommend it. So now I'm gonna go for my top 3 books of the year. And these are ones that are just the books that I had to like pick between to figure out what my favorite book of the year was. And it was really, really hard because I loved all 3 of these books almost equally. So it was really difficult to figure out what my favorite one out of the 3 were. So I'm going to save my favorite for the very, very end. But these were the 3 that I was choosing between. So the first one was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This book blew me away. I read this at the very beginning of the year, and I love a friends to lovers romance, but the thing about this book that was so good was it was so realistic. Like, you know when you read a romance and they either have bad communication, or they have like they make assumptions about each other, or the conflict doesn't make any sense, or they're being way more dramatic than they need to be, or why are you worried so much about this? Like, it's not even that big of a deal. Well, this didn't have any of that. Like, this was the most realistic, understanding romance I've read, where I'm like, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. Like, I understand why they'd be worried about this. Like, how are they going to fix this problem? Like, it's actually kind of a big problem. And they genuinely have good communication, and they talk things through, and they, like, try to figure things out as best as they can, and it's just one of those books that's just very satisfying because there's nothing in it that like irritates the crap out of you to where you're just annoyed reading it. It's all so well done, and it's a very realistic conflict that I can see happening in real life often, and it's just like so good. And the thing that's great about this is both characters are really likable. They both just fit really well together. They both have really good communication. They both put each other's feelings first, and they're just very realistic characters, and I think that's why I really, really like this book. And the main love interest is just so wonderful. He's like a cinnamon roll, and that's what I liked about him too, is like I love cinnamon roll, golden retriever guys, and that's definitely what he is. And I don't know, this book was just really, really well done in a way where it's just a satisfying read that you just don't get frustrated reading. And yes, there's conflict, but it just doesn't make you mad. And that's hard to do, I feel like, with romances. There's so many romances that I read that I get a little frustrated with, but this one just didn't have that at all. And it's one of my favorite romances of all time. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. This is definitely going to be a book that I reread in the future. 5 stars. Okay, you guys, I have 2 left. And if you guys watch my videos a lot, then you may know what they are, but it was these 2 books that I had a really hard time figuring out what was going to be my favorite of the year. But second place goes to The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. So The Ballad of Never After, and this whole series in general, this whole series kind of fits into my number 2 spot, but my favorite book in the series was The Ballad of Never After. This series is so good. It's so creative. It is so like whimsical and well done and well thought out. The characters are just chef's kiss. Like, she stayed on character the entire time. They had character arcs. Like, they did make growth and things like that, but like they were still themselves. Like, they still had their personality that they started with, which if authors could just do that more often, I'd be so much happier, because Evangeline was still Evangeline at the end, but she made growth, right? Jax was still Jax at the end, but they make growth. And it's just, I love when characters have a very clear personality and like they don't lose it throughout the book. And this, I just love this world. I love it. I love what she did with this world. It is whimsical. I have like an entire spiel about this book. I think it's in the makeup and wrap-up video, and I think I talk a lot about this book in that video. So if you want to hear more about it, you can go there. But man, this book, and I forgot to mention in that video, you guys, this is a big deal. You guys are gonna like flip when you hear this. I cried in this book. Like, when I say cry, like usually when I say I teared up, it means my eyes glazed over. That's about the extent of crying for me in a book, is when my eyes glaze over. I had a tear fall at the end of this book. A true tear fell down my cheek. That does not happen. I don't think that's ever happened in any book that I've ever read, is have like an actual tear fall. And there was something about this ending. The way that like, just something that the character did just really made me like, it just brought the emotions out of me. And I don't know why, but it was just something that was just so special. And I'm not gonna like give it away or anything, but man oh man, it just really did something to my heart, and I just loved it, and I just love these characters. I will always love this series, and I cannot wait to read Caraval this year, because I just want to read more about this world. I want to read more of Stephanie Garber's writing, because I love her writing. So this ended up being second place for best book of the year. And my favorite book of the year, some of you guys are probably cheering, because I know a lot of you guys wanted me to read this book. And there's a main book that I have not talked about yet. I love it. I'm gonna get it. So, my number 1 favorite book of the year, and I'm pretty confident in this, you guys. This was such a fantastic read. And it's one of those books where I'm like, this really, a romance, was my favorite book of the year out of all the books that I read. This one, like, I was not expecting it when I picked this book up at all. But it is Archer's Voice. This romance book is the pinnacle of romance books, you guys. If you have not read Archer's Voice, you have to. Like, this book is the perfect romance. Like, there's not a single thing that I would change about this book. Not a single thing. Everything about this book is just perfectly done. The characters are perfectly done. The communication is perfectly done. The conflict is perfectly done. There's nothing in this book that irritates me. The characters are so supportive of each other. Literally everything. The setting is perfect. Nothing in this book I would change. And that is rare for me to say. Like, even some of my all-time favorite books, like, I can say maybe, oh, I would change this, or oh, maybe this part of the book was a little slow. I wouldn't change anything about this. It is a flawless, flawless romance book, and the characters are just so good, you guys. I can't rave about this book enough, and I ended up buying this because I read this on Kindle. I bought the, obviously, physical copy. I can't wait to read this again. Like, I might even read this again this year because I'm that eager to read it again. I want to fully annotate it. I want to, like, write in it, circle it, just do everything I possibly can to this book because it is my all-time favorite romance. This has taken the #1 spot for romance, which is saying a lot because you guys know that I like, there's a lot of romances that I really, really like, and I've raved about some romances in the past, but this is definitely, like, if I could read one romance for the rest of my life, like contemporary romance, it would be this one. Like, without a doubt. Like, it's the best. So, if you haven't read Archer's Voice, and you've been thinking about it, because I know you've heard about it, and you're just kind of like, oh, because I know I was like, okay, like, sure. Take this as a sign that you need to read this now. Like, it's time. It's time. It's so good. So, #1 best book of the year was Archer's Voice. So that is it, you guys. That is my favorite books of the year. There was a lot more on here than I thought, but I read a lot of good books this year. Like I said, it was an 8.5 reading year for me, which is a really high rating. So I think last year would probably have been like a 6. Or even like a 5. Like, last year was not a good reading year, but an 8.5 this year, I can't complain about that. So lots of amazing books, you guys, and let me know in the comments what your favorite book that you read this year was. And I am really excited to share with you guys what my most disappointing reads were, because I'm going to film that probably tomorrow. But there's something so satisfying about ranting about books that you hate, and I'm excited to do that tomorrow because you guys probably know a few books that are going to be on that list, but these were the best. And I hope you guys read some of them. And if you have read any of these and you agree with me, let me know in the comments. And also let me know if you do not agree. Like, if you read any of these books and you hated them, I want to know that too. So I think that's it, guys. And I will see you guys in my next video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.